For our country, he wrote. I look forward to meeting Pope Leo XIV. Former President Barack Obama also congratulated Pope Leo, but the most colourful language came from the mayor of Chicago, who tweeted, "Everything dope, including the Pope, comes from Chicago." A Peruvian woman in Auckland says she cried happy tears when the new Pope was announced. Betty Gutierrez was among those celebrating the election of the new Pope at St Patrick's Cathedral's midday mass in Auckland this afternoon. She says she has a personal connection to the Pope from when he was the administrator and later bishop of the city of Chiclayo in Peru. She says she was overcome with emotion when she found out Leo was the new Pope.
We just scream and laugh and cry and we thank God because we are really pleased. It's the best thing, decision they could take. Yes, my family knows him. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Betty Gutierrez says it's wonderful for her people to see one of their own elected Pope. The government has opted against setting up a new compensation scheme for survivors of abuse in state care in favour of putting more money into the current system. That's at odds with a major recommendation of the Royal Commission of Inquiry and assurances made by the Prime Minister last year. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
In November, the Prime Minister delivered an apology and a promise. It was the government's intention, he said, to have a new single redress system operating this year. The details have just landed, and that's not what's in the plan. Instead, the coalition is injecting almost $775 million into the existing redress system over the next 4 years, and says that will increase average payments for new claims from about $19,000 up to $30,000, and will allow for already settled claims to be topped up.
Abuse and care survivors are calling the government's plans a betrayal. Survivor and advocate Keith Whiffen says survivors have been waiting a long time for something meaningful, and the government has let them down.
Today's announcement is essentially, for me, a minuscule amount of topping up of a thoroughly rotten process, governed by the very same people who have always opposed us and disrespected us.
Other survivors share Keith Whiffen's view, telling RNZ the government has broken its promise to them. Met Service has lifted most of its warnings for the North Island as the stormy weather continues to move east out to sea. Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty were under severe thunderstorm warnings earlier this evening, which brought intense bursts of heavy rain and reports of flooding and fallen trees. State Highway 29 over the Kaimai Range remains closed until further notice after a slip came down, blocking the road near the lookout. A heavy rain warning remains in place for Bay of Plenty, east of Tauranga, and Gisborne Tide Awhiti north of Ruatoria until 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. The former head of the Pay Equity Task Force, Amy Ross, says the government's sudden move to overhaul the rules for claims is appalling. The government fast-tracked legislation this week to raise the thresholds for pay equity claims. Amy Ross is in Iceland, helping leaders there navigate better pay equity for women. She says the original legislation to allow parity took a long time to develop, with input from a lot of experts in the industry.
But it's so shocking that they would choose to do this in a closed-door session with no expert input and not even seeking advice from the Ministry for Women.
A series of protests about the change were held this afternoon. The nurses' organisation says it will consider a women's strike in response to the reforms. Spokesperson Justine Sachs says she's never felt such anger among healthcare workers.
They're really shocked. They feel completely betrayed by this government, which campaigned on pay equity. A lot of the national, especially MPs, voted for the pay equity amendment in 2020. This wasn't something that they campaigned on. This wasn't something that was on the agenda. And, instead it just feels like, again and again, they're being attacked by this government.
Justine Sachs says she's heard talk among protesters of a women's strike like the one held in Iceland in 2023 over pay equity. It's 10:06. The government will launch a review into the Waitangi Tribunal to refocus the scope, purpose and nature of the tribunal's inquiry back to its original intent. The review is part of the coalition agreement between New Zealand First and National and will be led by an advisory group chaired by legal expert Bruce Gray. Māori Development Minister Tama Potaka says a review is timely given the progress of historical claims and settlements and concerns over the tribunal's workload. Engagement with Māori will begin soon, with proposals due before the end of the year. India and Pakistan are continuing to blame each other for escalating military tensions. Delhi claims there have been numerous ceasefire violations along the de facto border dividing Indian and Pakistani-administered Kashmir. The BBC's Davina Gupta is in Indian-administered Kashmir.
For now, we are relying on official sources from the Indian Army, which made it clear last night that Pakistan had fired missiles and drones at 3 of its military installations, and it has been able to neutralize these attacks, a charge that Pakistan has denied. The Indian Army also said there's been no loss of life in these areas so far. But right now I'm in Srinagar. The shops are shut here. Just in front of me, there's also a yellow security van of the Indian Armed Forces. There are hardly any people on the road, which conveys a sense of a heightened security concern.
The sister of a camper missing in Milford Sound says search parties have spotted a light partway down Mica Peak. Searchers have been combing the area for any sign of British man Eli Sweeting, who's been missing since Sunday. In a statement on a fundraising page, his sister, Serena Sweeting, says all efforts are focused on the area where the light was seen. She says the bush is so dense, it's hard for infrared gear to pick up any signs.